Oh, this comment section is going to be fun. Star Wars Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker, tells the story of Rey, Poe, and Finn coming together one last time to finally put an end to the First Order. Well, it's here, everybody. The final Star Wars saga film, at least for what they're saying. The Rise of Skywalker, Episode 9, the conclusion of the Disney Star Wars trilogy, the conclusion of the third Star Wars saga trilogy, and, unless they don't keep their word, the conclusion to the entire Skywalker saga, starting with the Episode 1, if you want to go chronological, or if you want to go by release date, A New Hope, all the way through to today. Very big event film, or at least it should have been. Kind of setting the stage for where I am as a Star Wars fan, because I feel like that's important to kind of understand my thoughts on this film and the previous film and just the saga as a whole. Always been a casual Star Wars fan. I thought I was a big Star Wars fan until I started to go on the internet and found out that I'm not even close to a lot of people. So I'm genuinely a casual Star Wars fan. I always enjoyed the original trilogy, especially as a kid. I liked the prequels when they first came out and have grown to not really like 2 out of the 3 of them. And this Disney Star Wars trilogy has been a bit of a mixed bag for me thus far. The Last Jedi, which I know is the one that kind of really colors your opinion as a Star Wars fan. You belong to this camp or this camp nowadays. I was disappointed in it. I didn't hate it on the level that a lot of people seem to have hated it. I don't think it's the worst Star Wars film or even close. I don't think it ruined my childhood, but I definitely think that there was a lot of story directions and character directions that I just genuinely don't enjoy. Are they bold? Are they ballsy? Are they something different for the Star Wars universe? Absolutely. And if you're into that, I understand why people love that movie so much. But for me, a lot of the decisions that were made in that film just don't work. And I rewatched it just 2 nights ago, and they still don't really rework for me. So, walking into The Rise of Skywalker, I was probably the least hyped and the least excited, maybe aside from Solo, a Star Wars story, that I've ever been walking into a Star Wars film. The way that The Last Jedi wrapped everything up didn't really add to my excitement. The kind of changing of directors and wondering if they're going to course correct or change things, or if they're going to, retcon things, or if they're going to keep the course and then we're just going to get stuck with some of the answers that we had in The Last Jedi. So many questions just left me to the point where I was just like, okay, I'll see it. And that's a shame, being that this was the final film in the Star Wars. This should have been like Avengers Endgame level of insanity as far as fan hype and walking into the theater and seeing just packed lines. And I just haven't felt that. I don't know if I'm the only one. I haven't felt a ton of hype and excitement for this movie. And me personally, like I said, wasn't really overly excited about it. But still cautiously optimistic and still was hoping that it was going to be good. Walked into it last night with both of my kids and watched the film. Gave it a night's rest to kind of think about it, and now I'm here to talk about my thoughts on Episode 9. So, here we go. Starting off with the positives for this film, having J.J. Abrams back in the director's seat means a lot of the things that I genuinely loved about The Force Awakens do carry over into The Rise of Skywalker. It's a very fast-paced, very fun, blockbuster, just slam-bang, action-packed Star Wars film. So if you like your Star Wars film to be very action-heavy, have a lot of big set pieces, have that fun kind of summer adventure feel to it, J.J. Abrams delivers that with most of his big blockbuster movies, and he does that very well here in The Rise of Skywalker. It's a 2.5-hour film, but it feels very fast-paced for the most part. There's a lot of different action sequences, fight sequences, chase sequences, space battle sequences. It really just kind of keeps going at a nice little clip throughout the entire movie, even during some of the kind of more somber moments or the more character-driven moments. It doesn't really feel like the movie goes down into a lull or hits the pause button or slams on the brakes. The movie has a nice little fun blockbuster clip going to it, and I enjoy that about a Star Wars film. I also loved having all of our main heroes back together again. You have Poe, you have Finn, and you have, of course, Rey. They were kind of separated for the majority, if not the entirety, of The Last Jedi. Having them back together in this brings back a lot of that charm and a lot of that character dynamic that I loved about The Force Awakens. So having them kind of come back and be together through the entirety of this story for the most part was enjoyable for me, because these characters interact really well with each other. The actors have a nice natural chemistry, and I just like seeing them come back together and have this final push for the Resistance, very similar to how Han, Luke, and Leia had in The Return of the Jedi, after ending up kind of separated by the end of The Empire Strikes Back. And I will say this too, as far as the utilization of Carrie Fisher and the utilization of the character of Princess Leia, I absolutely loved what they do with her character. They obviously don't have a lot to work with. They had to reuse some footage from Force Awakens because she passed away before they were really, I don't even think they started this film before she passed away, but they certainly didn't have enough to do a full character arc with her. But for the amount that they had to work with her being, you know, passed away, and from where they left her character in The Last Jedi and from where they found her in The Force Awakens, kind of bringing that all full circle here and showing us some things that we kind of have always wanted to see but didn't really know that we've always wanted to see it. There's things that they do with her character to expand her as a character and to wrap her up as a character that I thought was just beautifully done. So if you're going to nail one character in this movie, certainly Princess Leia, or General Leia by this point, is the one that you should nail. And in my opinion, they nailed her. They nailed her. All right, comment section, please do not turn that into a sex meme. You know what I'm saying. The movie's also shot very well. There's a lot of huge sequences. You've seen a lot of them in the trailer where they're like on top of the wreckage of the second Death Star and there's the waves of water coming through. There's a lot of really cool sequences that you could almost make like screenshots or posters. There's those standout set pieces throughout about 2 or 3 different scenes in this film. The lair of the Emperor, like the whatever the hell the planet was called. Even some stuff in the beginning where like you have Kylo Ren running through this wooded area just taking people out, which was also shown in the trailer. Just some very well shot sequences, which is something that I actually really enjoyed about The Last Jedi. I think that Rian Johnson maybe arguably have done better than any director in the Star Wars universe, is really cool standout sequences as far as shots and camera work and cinematography. And J.J. Abrams, while not necessarily being known for that, I think that he does do a lot of good things with that in The Rise of Skywalker. Fan service for me in this film was done really well. It's gonna be one of those things, you know, fan service is always kind of walking that fine line. Is it gonna feel desperate? Is it gonna be on the nose? Is it gonna annoy you? Or is it gonna be genuinely emotional and rewarding and fun for fans of this saga, of this franchise, of this world, these characters? For me, I definitely landed much more on this end of the camp where most of the fan service felt like it was earned. It felt like it had a good place in this final film. It hit me emotionally when it was supposed to hit me. I laughed in certain spots where you were supposed to laugh. And a movie like this that's not only kind of closing out the saga, but also kind of celebrating the entire saga from beginning to end, you do need to have a good amount of fan service because J.J. Abrams, you can tell, walked into this just overall his main mission was trying to please as many fans as possible. And one of the best ways to do that is with fan service. Now, I was talking about our heroic characters. I probably should have talked a little bit about the opposite side of the Force, and I really enjoyed how they used Kylo Ren in this film too.
I know who you are. I know the rest of your story.
So by this one, obviously from the end of The Last Jedi, he's now the supreme leader. He's the leader of the First Order. He's the main dude. He's the one everybody looks to. He's the one that everybody's intimidated by. And they've already really strongly established that there's some kind of a link through the Force between him and Rey. And they carry that over story-wise here to where I enjoyed story-wise where they took his character, his relationship, antagonistic thing going on with Rey. I also like just visually how they utilized him. I always thought that Kylo Ren was much more intimidating and much more of a cool character while he had his helmet on and had his voice going on. In The Last Jedi, they smashed his helmet in the beginning and he was basically just Ben Solo for the rest of the film. And I just don't feel like visually he's anywhere near as intimidating as a villain without his helmet and his cape and everything going on. So they kind of go back to that. They have like this welding scene where they put his helmet back together. You've seen it in the trailer where it has like red lines, like scars. I think it's actually a really cool look. And even the scenes where he's outside of his helmet, I feel like are utilized better for the character to where he still keeps up that intimidation factor. He still feels like a strong villain, a strong antagonist. And so as a wrap up for his character, I feel like they utilized him much better in this than I felt they did in the last film. And as a final positive, this movie does have probably the most original trilogy feel going on for it than any of the other films in this trilogy. And I know The Force Awakens got a lot of flack for feeling like A New Hope. I've never really subscribed to that camp. I know they took pieces for the story, but for me it always felt like its own thing. this movie really does, as far as the vibe, as far as the charm and the energy, does have a very original trilogy feel to it. It's not ripping off story elements left and right, so don't take that as what I'm saying, but just as far as the feel of the movie, it fits that original trilogy vibe the most. And for me, that's a good thing, especially when you're wrapping everything up. It's good to kind of have that charming, a little bit family friendly, while certainly there's some things I'm going to talk about that are not necessarily family friendly that I thought was interesting, but having that original trilogy approach to this final film to me was a good thing. It was enjoyable. It made it kind of feel cohesive with the entire saga, and while it's celebrating the entire saga, that vibe and that feel and that energy of the original trilogy certainly propels that a little bit in this final film for me. Now moving on to the mixed aspects, and I think I might have the most things that I'm mixed about with this film than any other film this year. This was definitely a bit of a mixed bag for me. There's things that I thought was great about this film. There's things that I did not like at all that I will talk about in the next segment. And there's a lot of things that I either really liked but was confused by, or felt in the middle with. There were so many things that they did in this film that I just kind of was scratching my head about. So starting off with the big one for me, and that is the reintroduction, the resurrection of Emperor Palpatine, or Darth Sidious, whatever you want to call him. Now, they pretty much launched the first teaser trailer with ending with his laugh, letting everybody know this is the big thing that we're going to have in this final film, is that the Emperor is still here and probably was the one pulling the strings the entire time from Force Awakens to now. The issues that I have with it, well, start off with the things that I liked about it. Now, I just hinted at you that there was things that weren't necessarily family friendly. For me as a horror fan, to me, the sequences with Emperor Palpatine in this movie is the most horror that Star Wars ever gets. Like, it's very dark and black, and there's like blue intimidating lightning going on in this little lair that they show where the Emperor's been hanging out for the last God knows how many years, where he's kind of being kept alive. And the way that they shoot him, and the way that they the way that the cinematography moves throughout his entire lair, and the way that they shoot his character specifically in the shadows and with that pale white skin that he always has, and he's almost like more demonic now than ever, I thought was really cool. To me, that was very intimidating. To me, just looking at him, even if you've never seen a Star Wars film before, you can look at him and be like, that's the dude you don't screw with. And I liked that. I liked the fact that they really carried over that serious evil that the Emperor has and has always had in this entire saga, and made it probably more amplified than it's ever been in the final film. Now, as far as things that I don't really care for with him coming back, number one, it just feels out of place just throwing that in randomly in the third film. Now, I'm going to kind of elaborate on that a little bit with the next thing I'm going to talk about as far as mixed, but him kind of all of a sudden being the one that was pulling the strings and bringing back this proven classic character of the Star Wars saga, instead of having somebody like Supreme Leader Snoke end up being, you know, the big bad by the end of the third film, it just felt a little off to me. It felt like it didn't land as much as it should have. And it also, to me, kind of screws with the entire legacy of Darth Vader's story arc, because the entire thing with the first 6 films is really the story of Anakin Skywalker and his rise, his fall, and then his redemption at the very end, with him fulfilling his prophecy of being the one to end the Empire. Even though he was the one that brought the Empire to power, he's the one that cuts the legs off at the end by throwing the Emperor down that pit. And the fact that the Emperor has been alive all this time, redoing all this shit and causing all this chaos even after Darth Vader's sacrifice, to me just kind of cheapens and negates his entire arc, and I'm not necessarily a fan of that. I also didn't really care for the fact that, you know, it's introduced in this film so suddenly. Like, it's even in the opening crawl where they're like, Emperor Palpatine's back, and the movie opens up with characters finding out that he's back. They immediately know who he is, and they're on the charge to go find him. To me, it just doesn't feel natural, which I've already kind of talked about, it feeling weird to just introduce that in the third act of this trilogy, but it just felt very sudden to just throw him in, where it felt like it should have been this huge, holy shit reveal, to where if they had carried through the entire trilogy with a cohesive vision, maybe by the end of the second film, they reveal that Palpatine's still out there, and you let us chew on that for 2 years until we see this film. So, I don't know. Emperor Palpatine, cool to see him visually. don't necessarily think that he was the best utilized thing in The Rise of Skywalker. And the next biggest thing that I'm very conflicted on, which I've also kind of hinted at talking about Palpatine's utilization, is that this movie very much feels like J.J. Abrams taking what he would have had for his second film in the trilogy and his third film in the trilogy, smashing them together and giving it to you all in one film, while at the same time very much being a retcon of a lot of things in The Last Jedi. And that's going to really piss a lot of people off that were a fan of The Last Jedi, as well as people that I kind of honestly am on the camp with, that even though I didn't care for The Last Jedi and the things that it did, I'm not necessarily of the opinion that you should negate that entire movie as irrelevant. So there's one thing, the kind of, not necessarily disrespect, but there's certainly a little bit of flack being thrown at Rian Johnson. Like there's a line in the film where Rey throws the lightsaber, and there's a line about Jedi's weapon should be treated with more respect, which is kind of throwing shade at the thing with Luke throwing the lightsaber behind him at the beginning of The Last Jedi, but very directly retconning decisions that was made in The Last Jedi, something that was very strange to me and makes me wonder who the hell is running this place. Like, Kathleen Kennedy's already been in a lot of flack for the things that she's done since being in charge of the Disney Star Wars, and just never getting on the same page of the directors and having huge issues towards the end of the production of Rogue One, changing the directors completely after being almost entirely shot with Solo and redoing the whole film with Ron Howard. Then you have this whole thing where J.J. Abrams set forth this trilogy and they let Rian Johnson have full, complete creative control, and he does his own thing with it, which some people like, some people get really pissed off about, and now letting JJ come back and do whatever he wants with what happened in The Last Jedi, it just feels like nobody's running the show. That aside, just the whole feel of two films being crammed into one, it makes things feel unearned, it makes some things feel sudden like Palpatine, and it makes some things feel like there's so much going on in this movie that you're trying to please everybody, and you have a very strong shot at not completely satisfying anyone, because there's going to be most of the things that this person likes, and a lot of things that this person likes, and a lot of things that this person likes, but at the same time you're throwing in shit that's going to piss off this person and this person and this person. So I feel like the most people that are going to watch this film are going to be kind of on that mixed aspect, where there's things that they like, things that they were really scratching their heads about, because there's just battling ideologies and battling story ideas of two different filmmakers between the last film and this one, and two different films worth of storyline and twists and plot elements just shoved into one, and trying to get it all out there by the end of this saga, that it makes the film feel a little disjointed and a little weird. It's also going to make this trilogy be very strange years later. Like when you watch just The Force Awakens and then The Last Jedi and then this film, it's going to feel very convoluted, it's going to feel very disjointed over time, and it's going to just make the entire trilogy package feel like a bit of a mess from start to finish, because you have the directors sandwiching with J.J. Abrams and Rian Johnson, which is a very different director in the middle, and it's just going to make the whole thing feel like a fight almost, where you have the Force Awakens storyline setups, you have the Rian Johnson storyline kind of negating a lot of those setups, and then you have the Rise of Skywalker bringing some of them setups back and retconning what was done, and it's just going to feel like, what's going on here? I was also very mixed on just the story of this film, because while I really enjoyed the back half of it and a lot of the payoffs and a lot of the conclusions to things and a lot of the fan service and where they overall end all of these storylines and end all of these characters, I was very satisfied with. I feel like I can walk away from The Rise of Skywalker story-wise and be like, okay, I'm cool with that being the end of the entire Skywalker legacy. On the other side of that, the first half, or at least the first hour of this film, is one of my least favorite forms of storytelling in movies, and that's where you have a MacGuffin. For those that aren't familiar with that term, a MacGuffin is an object or an item in a script that solely exists to propel the script forward. So the entire first half of this film, the first hour, whatever it is just our heroes trying to get object A so that they can get to place B. And that's a very boring story for me. There's a lot of exposition. It's fun to see these characters together. There's certainly action sequences and character interactions and, you know, some lines of dialogue that makes it fun throughout, but just story-wise, the first half of this film was a little boring for me, to the point where I actually started to nod off at one point, because it's just, all right guys, we got to get this object. Here's a clue of where this object is. Let's go to this planet and follow this clue. Oh, this clue is a dead end, but there's something else here that might lead to this. So let's go talk to this person on this planet and try to find this. Oh, we have an issue with what this is, so we need to go to this to get this, to come back to get this. And it's a very popular form of storytelling to make your script work, but to me, it's one of the most uninteresting things to do with characters. Now moving on to the negatives of The Rise of Skywalker. And one of the bigger ones for me, because I loved this character in The Force Awakens, is Finn. Finn, to me, gets almost nothing to do in this film aside from just hang out with the other characters. The first film, he might be my favorite, The Force Awakens, he might be my favorite character in that film. And they were all really great characters, but he was the one that to me just kind of stood out a bit. The Last Jedi, I absolutely hated what they did with his character. I thought his entire subplot was one of the worst parts of the film. I despised the romance between him and Rose because it was just forced and was not working on screen. Have no problem with the character of Rose, have no problem with the actress, but just what they did with those characters I thought was a joke, especially ending with her crashing into him and everything. Not a fan. You get to this film, and again, not getting into spoilers, but they kind of course correct, if you will, or just retcon completely what was going on in The Last Jedi, and he's back with the main characters again. Rose is just barely in the movie, and he's doing his thing, but he doesn't really have anything to do aside from shout people's names when things are going wrong. Rey! Poe! Chewie! Seriously, take a shot every time this dude shouts somebody's name in a shot. It's like the entire film, but character arc wise, I just feel like they didn't really give him anything. Poe has a very good character arc in this from where he was in The Force Awakens. Rey obviously has a lot of focus in this film and a huge character arc. Finn, just kind of there. There's also some new Force abilities that they introduce in this film that I gotta admit, I was kind of digging at first whenever I first saw it, just because the visual of what they were doing was cool as far as the camera movements. You'll know what I'm talking about when you see it. But after the film being done, especially with the number of times that they did it, I did not end up liking these new abilities because they felt like absolute script conveniences. Without getting into too much detail, they basically really stretched the ability of a Jedi to be able to have items appear or to transfer items to other people. And to me, that was very lazy script writing and very huge script conveniences to where, oh, we need this character to have this item, but no way to get it to him, so we'll just create this power where another Jedi can get it to them in a blink of an eye, and then there, we just, no problem, right? To me, it felt cheap. It was never introduced ever before in this entire saga. There's plenty of points in the rest of this saga where that ability would have been utilized if it was actually an ability the Jedi's had. And to me, it felt tacked on to throw that ability in at the end of this saga to where it's just like, okay, you're just cheating. So overall, guys, I walked out of episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker, mostly satisfied with what I got. I think that story-wise, it's a very good conclusion to the saga. I think that it's action-packed. I think that the character dynamic is really great. And I certainly enjoy what they do with Princess Leia and with Kylo Ren and just wrapping up his entire storyline with Rey. And it was a very fun, enjoyable film that got the vibe right from the original trilogy, in my opinion. Not the best story in the world, certainly does a lot of retconning that I don't think was necessary and I definitely don't think is respectful, and it does do some things with Finn that I just feel like you could have done more and introduced some really convenient Force powers. Overall, it's a mixed bag, but I definitely lean on the side of enjoying it. And I'll sum it up like this. While I don't necessarily like a lot of the story and character directions that they took in The Last Jedi, when comparing these two, because this is probably going to be the biggest comparison that people are going to make between The Last Jedi and The Rise of Skywalker, I walked out enjoying The Rise of Skywalker more, but I think that The Last Jedi is certainly a better made, more cohesive and coherent film.
Your journey its end.
So if you're a fan of Star Wars, if you have been along the ride for this saga since the beginning, or if you're a new fan that has just caught up and you want to see how this thing wraps up, I think most people will walk out enjoying The Rise of Skywalker. While you might not agree completely with some of the story directions, I think all of the fan service and the wrap up and the conclusion of this saga will win most people over. So check this thing out in theaters, and then whenever it hits the shelves, go out and buy it. So what did you guys think of The Rise of Skywalker? Did this deliver everything that you wanted for the conclusion of this saga and this trilogy? Did it really piss you off with the things that it decided to retcon and the things that it decided to do story and character-wise? Where did you land? And try your best, please, in the comment section to remain as peaceful as possible. Please do not turn into a toxic cesspool, guys. We are all different generations, different movie backgrounds, different tastes walking into this film. We're gonna disagree. We're gonna like things that this person didn't like. We're gonna hate things that this person didn't like. Just try to converse down below about why you like and dislike things without attacking everybody, although I'm sure there's already 5 or 6 of you down there doing that. But nonetheless, try to keep it respectful. Try to keep it spoiler-free, although I will tell you, if you want to avoid spoilers, you shouldn't look at the comment section anyway until you've seen it. But nonetheless, let's talk some Star Wars Rise of Skywalker, guys. What did you think? Please like and share this video. Hit that subscribe button if you are not already a subscriber. If you want to check out some social media links, click the video description below, and you'll get Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and my Patreon page, which is a great way to give back to this channel, help this channel grow, and get cool exclusive content for your eyes only if you decide to become a patron. Just below that is my Teespring store, guys. It's got all my merchandise designs created by my buddy Woody Bowen, so check all of that out. And overall, guys, if you want to check out some more of my videos, including my spoiler and spoiler-free review of The Last Jedi and some of my past rankings of the entire saga, you can check that out by clicking right over here.